So let's talk about what is this presence thing we're talking about anyway. So some people call it the it factor. If you think of somebody in your life or that you know or have seen who has presence, think of an adjective to describe them and just get it in your head for me. You got it? My guess is it might be in the neighborhood of this, one of these. Inspiring, dynamic, commanding, empathetic. Anybody have a different one? Yeah. Comical. Great. Sense of humor. It's a great one. But I'm pretty close, right? Within reason. So we know it when we see it, for the most part. The problem with these descriptors for presence is how do you actually get this stuff? So let's say I want to be charismatic. Can I just pencil that in next Tuesday, 2 o'clock? I'm going to get right on that charismatic thing. I'm going to be so good by Thursday. Right? It's very difficult. These definitions we have are hard to affect. And that's what I struggled with presence when I was working with my clients in my own work so often. So I define presence as the ability to connect with and inspire others. Okay, connect with and inspire others. Now let's think about that for a second. When you think of those folks who've had presence in your life, they might be charismatic or they might not be charismatic. But they could connect with you and inspire you. They might be commanding or maybe not. Maybe they're warm and approachable. So the definitions we have for presence, which seem very tough for us to achieve, aren't really what presence is about at its core. We try to develop presence from the outside in. The outside in, right? We tell people to wear a power suit. Make commanding gestures. That'll do it. Make very sustained eye contact. Don't break it. Right? That's how we tell people to get presence. But the problem with that is that we can see you in there. We can see you. We have this amazing ability as humans. I call it presence voyeurs. We notice people's presence very quickly. We can see who they are. And so this is not sustainable for most people. So the model that we're talking about is really from the inside out. Inside out approach to presence. And it's somewhere in that junction of who you really are, right? Your unique self and how other people perceive you. It's in that junction. It's not trying to be way over this way or way over this way. It's in the middle. And there's 3 components to it that we're going to talk about today. The first is being intentional. Getting very clear about your intentions and how you want to show up. The second one is about individual connections, that connection piece. So we don't connect with people because of their job title. And when you get a promotion, people don't all of a sudden want to follow you. Right? We connect with people because of the connections they make, the individual piece. The third piece is inspirational. How do we light a fire in other people? Okay, inspire, the root of it, literally means to breathe life into. So we've got to have it in us to get it in other people. We live in language. All the time, there's a narrative going on in our heads. Right? Right now, you guys are having a narrative about me. I'm glad I came. I hope this is going someplace. This is really relevant. Whatever it is, you've got a narrative. When you walked in today, you had a narrative about where you were and what it was going to be about. We carry it with us all the time. And so you may say, well, those are my private thoughts. What does that matter? Well, it matters because those private thoughts show up. And they show up in a couple of different ways. They show up in what I call our macro actions, the big choices we make, and in our micro actions, our body language, our facial expressions, how we carry ourselves. So if you have a thought that these trainings are generally not productive, then you might not come, first of all. Or if you do come, you might come late. You might sit in the back. Right? You might not take notes. You may look for what I'm doing wrong. All those things might happen. And your body language might reflect it. Right? You see people who sit closed off. Right? Don't make eye contact. All those come from that thought that you started with when you came in. And here's the thing we know about these thoughts that we carry around. People have these thoughts for decades. Sometimes your whole life, you don't even know they're there. They're below the conscious level. So as a coach, I run into these thoughts all the time. They are things like, I'm not a people person. I don't play office politics well. Right? I'm just not the kind of person that's funny. I can't tell jokes. I'm not a funny person. People don't connect with me. I'm not authoritative enough, right? I could go on and on and on and on. Somewhere there'll be someone in here that's familiar to, right? We just carry them around. They're just there. Again, narrative going on and on and on and on. So these matter because they show up. They show up for us. So how on earth then do you get in charge of all these intentions, these things floating around in our head causing these reactions that we may or may not want? Well, the only way to do it is to become very intentional about what you want to communicate and how you want to show up, and to figure out a way to hold it, right? To figure out a way to keep it. And so there are two ways that I advocate doing that in the book. The first one is through getting very clear about your personal presence brand, and that's really a stable representation of yourselves, your core values that you can remember and keep with you over time. And I outline an exercise, which is a bit longer than our time here, for you to do on your own time to think about that and get clear about it. The other one I recommend is called a situational intention. And this is something that I use all the time, at least once a day. And it's very easy, and it's simply taking a few minutes before you walk into any sort of exchange. It can be one-on-one, it can be a large group, whatever the case is, and determining how you want to show up before you do it. Okay, so that sounds really easy, sounds overly easy, doesn't it? But it has great power when you do it. And I'll give you an example. A client of mine who is a CEO of a technology company had come on, and she was running this new company. They were trying to get everything together and really make it into that next echelon where they had large Fortune 500 customers. And so she was up pitching some business to win this big Fortune 500 customer, their first for the company. So it would be transformational, right? Just to give you the sense. And it's one of those things they call a bake-off. And I know you guys do this all the time too, where you have different vendors come in one after the other, and they have a certain time slot. And so she said, I was sitting with my team out in the hallway. And the other company, the vendor, comes out ahead of us, and of course they look like rock stars, right? That's your impression, like they've nailed it, And she's like, and I was so nervous, my stomach was just churning. And so I leaned back against the wall, and all of a sudden I thought about the situational tension. And she said, and I realized that in my head was the thought, we're not ready for this. We're not ready for this. And she said, my thought should have been, we deserve this. We deserve it. Okay, of course, it's a great story because they got it. But that is the power of just stopping and realizing what's in your head and shifting it to what you want to be in your head. And it works. So I also offer this model in the book, and it's called the intentionality frame. And perhaps it would be helpful for some of your work. And it's the idea that before we have a conversation, if we can think of our points in alignment with our intention, then we'll be a lot closer to getting them across. For most of us, when we prepare for a discussion, if we're really on our game, we might think about what we want to say ahead of time, right? And then if we are an A student, we might think about what the audience wants or needs to hear. Are you with me? Okay, this is for the A+ students out there. Think about what you want the audience to feel. Because we process in emotional terms. So, you can have the most beautiful PowerPoint, but no one is going to leave your presentation saying, that graph on slide 9, it got me right here, right? It was so touching. Right? They're not. They're going to say, I was excited by that. I felt encouraged, or I felt inspired, or I'm worried, or whatever the case is. It's an emotional reaction that you carry forward, that you remember. So when you're thinking of having those conversations, instead of making a list, which we usually do, where we get a piece of paper and we write down our points and bullets or whatever, start here. Start with your intended reaction. If you can express it in emotional terms, perfect. If you can't, get as close as you can. And then make your points on the outside of the frame. Now you can convert that into PowerPoint, you can put it in whatever you want, but just start here with your points.